Gods. There are a lot of different ways of thinking about gods. All-powerful beings, unknowable cosmic entities who allow our existence simply because we fall beneath their notice. Benevolent creatures with power beyond our understanding. Not so benevolent creatures with powers beyond our understanding. A fiction we tell ourselves in order to make some sense of the universe, so that we may sleep at night without fear of the cosmic unimportance we represent. There are many different ways fiction has interpreted the concept. And of course, Arknights is no exception. That is where the Feranmuts come into the picture. Arknights is living gods, beings of immense power that no mere mortal can hope to match. Beings of immense power that only the most powerful of Sarkaz can hope to match. Already, the divinity of these gods is being called into question, so we should probably start talking about them in some actual detail. Despite my little joke earlier, the Feranmuts are among the most powerful beings within the world of Arknights, having existed on Terra since before the Doctor's race reached it 13,000 years before the beginning of the game. The Feranmuts existed in far greater numbers before, but at some point, seemingly long before the arrival of the Doctor's race, even before Terra had properly formed, the Feranmuts fought a war with an eye which broke the heavens. We know practically nothing about this war, as it was only mentioned by Ya during a battle with Chang'e. But the fact that it is described as reshaping Terra itself may be the event that caused the creation of the Star Pod, although that would place it after the arrival of the Doctor's race. It might literally be a throwaway line in Vernal Winds, but this war in heaven is genuinely fascinating to me, and hopefully it gets expanded on as it explains why so little Feranmuts remain today. So what actually are the Feranmuts? Well, the short answer is we don't really know. They are described as gods, and if not gods, they are godlike beings. We don't know whether they reproduce. We don't know whether they just pop into existence one day. But we do know that they are, as we would describe it, gods. They don't require worship to exist, but they do seem to be tied to specific areas. At least some of them. So potentially they are a form of earth spirit or something similar, a nature spirit, an embodiment of a part of Terra. But just because we don't know exactly what they are doesn't mean we can't discuss them. The in-universe term Feramut comes from the lands of Sargon, and for the most part has been adopted all over Terra by those who know of these creatures' existence. And if they are not known by the term Feramut, they are mostly just referred to as gods by those who worship them. See the people of Kjeragandr as an example of that with Kjeragandr. The gods themselves vary wildly in shape and size, where seemingly the only common point of comparison is the great power they hold. From being able to wipe out entire armies of men, to preventing catastrophes from affecting a region, to controlling space and time, the power held by the Feramut is undeniable. Even when shattered into fragments of themselves, they retain enough strength for each fragment to be at worst comparable to some of the greatest fighters on Terra. The most prominent of the Feramut to us Arknights readers is Sui, and they are very clearly based on Chinese dragons. So Feramut are essentially representations of mythological beings from our world. They also don't play by the typical rules of the Arknights world. The power they possess is distinctly different from Originium Earth's, and they are outright immune to oripathy. It's still not clear why that is, but it's likely due to the nature of Feramut being distinctly more than just a biological species. After all, they might not be omnipotent gods, but they are still far closer to gods than anything else on Terra. And as such, Feramut are effectively immortal. They can be killed, yes, or shattered into fragments, but even then, they are still able to potentially revive, and their soul seems to endure long past the destruction of their body. These souls have even been used by the Sarkaz as power sources for their weapons. Most notably is Mostima's lock and key staves. The power of each Feramut is seemingly tied to the area in which they reside, with a common power between them being the manipulation of the weather and the land around where they reside. Many Feramut are often parts of the environment that they call home, with the two most obvious examples of this being Kjeragandr, who is often described as the very mountain worshipped by her people, and of course the Feramut Sami, who is quite literally the ground the Sami people worship and live upon. But being limited to one area is not something that you should use to call them weak. For the most part, these beings have absolute dominion over their home, being able to perform feats far beyond mortal comprehension. But not even the gods are invincible, and nowhere proves that better than the Great Hunt of Yan. One of the old emperors of Yan organized this great hunt against the gods, as they did not place their favor behind the people of Yan and deprived the land of their protection. And even by themselves, they might have succeeded. With millions of casualties, yes, but a win is a win. However, the Great Hunt was aided by the Feranmut Sui, who threw their might behind this emperor in order to aid in killing off its competition, killing most of the firmament within Yan and exiling the survivors. And thus, the foundation of the Sui sibling story was set, and that's pretty much the foundation for firmament lore in general. So we should probably give some focus to the notable Feranmut, and by that I of course mean the Feranmut that have actually been mentioned or focused on with some actual meat to them, although we will mention the ones with less focus just for completeness sakes. Starting off with the most obvious choice, Sui, pretty much the firmament we know simultaneously the most and least about. We know very little about the Feranmut itself, but considering that we follow the story of its fragments, we have a lot of knowledge about it in that regard. Of the 12 fragments of Sui, we currently have knowledge of around 8 of them: Nian, Dusk, Ling, Chongye, Shu, Wang, and 2 Gs. And there is a 9th one if you do include the Chef brother. We literally only know about him from one Nian voice line, but they do exist. A video could probably be dedicated to each of the playable siblings, and Wang is supposedly the final villain that the Sui events are building up to, so I'm sure as time goes on, we'll have way more knowledge about the siblings and Sui itself. Nian is my favorite, by the way, and I hope to one day actually have her on my account. But Chongye definitely has my favorite event. Vernal Winds is fantastic, and you should read it now while it is rerunning. We should probably focus on the Feranmut itself, and we have already mentioned quite a bit about it in the general lore section. Sui was a Feranmut of Yan, and when the Great Hunt occurred, it joined the people of Yan against the other members of its kind. For noble and kind reasons, I'm sure. Well, not exactly. Sui had intended to make itself the only god of Yan. So the final hunt of this Great Hunt period was for Sui itself, and it was subjugated by the Emperor of Yan and forced to shatter itself into 12 fragments. These fragments would of course eventually become the Sui siblings, and despite being fragments of this god, none of them really understand the intentions of their original self, with all of them either being afraid of becoming it again, or actively working to prevent or ensure it comes back into existence. The story of Sui is far from over, so only time will tell if this god will return to Terra, or if the glimpse that we saw in Invitation to Wine is the last time it will appear on Terra in any form. Next up is the Feranmut that resides in the winter wonderland of Kjeragandr. She is known by many names, including the Sacred One, the Mother of Kjerag, and the Goddess of the Snow Realm. Kjeragandr very much lives up to her titles as the Mother of Kjerag. Thousands of years ago, Kjeragandr led the people of what would become Kjerag to the mountains and would protect her people from all forms of natural disasters, including catastrophes. As such, the people of Kjerag grew up without truly fearing the infected, as very little of them became infected outside of those in mining accidents. In Kjerag myth after this, Kjeragandr would ascend to the heavens, where she would look down upon her people with love as they formed Kjerag into what it would become today. In reality, Kjeragandr had other ideas, and decided that she would continue to aid her people, just in a different form than before. Kjeragandr took the form of our beloved Ice Maid, Kjer, and would serve as the assistant of the saintess of her very own religion. A very interesting strategy, but a seemingly effective one for keeping in touch with her people, and for the most part, she has a rather hands-off approach to leading her followers. On one hand, she's very happy that people are still worshipping her, and on the other hand, she's rather disappointed by her followers' strict adherence to her religion prior to the events of Break the Ice. She is currently serving as the maid to Enya Silverash, also known as paramedics, and Kjer is working with her to bring Kjerag into the modern age. During the events of Break the Ice, she aided Rhodes Island in their efforts to avert a complete civil war in Kjerag, and at the end of the event, she threw some divine intervention behind Enya in order to resolve the conflict before it completely broke out into a full-on civil war. In the Lake Silbernerhose event, she mostly remains passive, not being too active or throwing her divine intervention around to resolve the conflict. She is mostly just there to complain about the 30-meter tall statue that the people of Kjerag built in her honor, pretty much because it doesn't really resemble her that much, and she's rather annoyed by that. She even uses Dagindrutcher for a bit of remodeling work to trim it down to size. She also decides to mess with the Trilby Asher in order to prevent him from investigating the statue of Kjeragandr too closely. She does this by teleporting him from the center of the lake where the statue is built back to outside the boundaries of the lake, painting a pretty clear picture for the Trilby Asher that she is not one to be trifled with. Her story isn't the main focus of the Kjerag storyline, but I am sure we'll see plenty more of her as a part of it. Next up on our list of notable Feranmuts is one whose name isn't exactly clear, but we shall be referring to them as Lifebone, as that is what they are referred to as during the events of Chapter 13. This Feranmut is dead, physically at least, but there is still some life left in their bones. This Feramut was even speaking to Calcid during the events of Lone Trail, although that was a projection to her by Friston, but she must have had some connection to the Feramut at some point during her life in order for this projection to have been made. Lifebone unfortunately ran afoul of the Sanguinoke at some point during their life, and due to that unfortunate meeting would wind up dead, at least physically. Despite this very much physical death, their spirit has endured, and the Sarkaz were able to take its power over space and time and seal them away into a set of staves, a lock and a key. This lock and key would eventually find their way into the hands of a Sancta, Mostima, who after finding them would become a fallen angel and carry them with her as her primary weapons. She became a fallen angel due to entirely separate reasons, kinda, but you know, it's kinda ironic that she gets the power of a god and becomes a fallen angel. Despite being dead, the Sanguinoke was able to perform a ritual on the bones of Lifebone to turn them into a transportation system for the Sarkaz during their occupation of Londinium. This not only gave them an incredible system of travel, they could keep themselves supplied and move large amounts of troops around without alerting the Victorian troops. You can imagine how useful the ability to bend space is during a war. So, the combined forces of Rhodes Island, the Exemplars, and the Arknights trio took the battle to the Sanguinoke in order to disable the system. And after a tough battle against him, Holdra manages to take control of the creature, and is presumably going to use it to further their own goals in taking down the Sarkaz occupation. Lifebone is a pretty interesting fellow, although considering they're dead, it's tough to know how active they will be in the future and whether we'll learn much more about them. Sami shares a name with the country in which it resides. Called the All-Father or the Will of Sami by the people of Sami, this Feranmut is quite literally the ground that the Sami call home. Due to this, it is by far the largest Feranmut we actually know of. Many incredible supernatural occurrences that occur in the land of Sami, like moving trees or moving mountains, are in fact the work of this great Feranmut. The All-Father is worshipped not just due to being a god, but due to the fact that the snow priests and the shamans of Sami can get direct divine inspiration due to this worship. A being of extreme benevolence. Once Sami has accepted you into the country, it shall aid you. But should you break or defy the will of Sami, you will not only be abandoned by a god, you will be punished. Presumably at one point, Sami roamed the lands of Terra, like the other Feranmuts. But at some point in history, Sami was injured to the point where it had to retreat underground to recover. Now, thousands of years later, the will of Sami is in constant battle with the demons of the North. Its own body is being corrupted by these demons on a constant basis, but it fights back. With the help of its followers, the steady tide of corruption is being halted or pushed back, but it is overall a losing battle, and a more permanent solution will need to be brought about eventually. The first ending of Integrated Strategies 4 shows us the process of being accepted by Sami. In this case, following Magellan's adventures through the land and her further explorations into the heartland of Sami, the Feranmut reaches out to her. In her case, it questions Magellan's intentions before accepting her into his fold. And following that moment, Magellan's journey in Sami now had the backing of its god. And that backing would prove to be of great help during her journey's culmination at the gate in the heart of Sami's ice fields. Ya is a Feramut who survived the Great Hunt and returns to Yan in order to get revenge on the Feramut who betrayed their kind. Sweet. Ya was greatly injured during this Great Hunt, and despite having rested for centuries, has been unable to recover, and is actually dying during her appearance in the Vernal Winds event. Despite that, she is an immensely powerful creature, being able to take on multiple strong opponents without breaking a sweat. Ya is an extremely arrogant person, viewing the mortal inhabitants of Terra as beneath her and hating that they have usurped the rule of the Feranmuts. Despite that, she reserves her largest grudge for Sui, holding its betrayal of the Feranmuts as a sin that must be punished. And in order to ensure that both goals are achieved, she forms a group of Feramut cultists to aid in destabilizing Yan. So, despite viewing mortals as lesser beings, she's not above putting them to work to further her own goals. Ya is the one who can cut away seasons and hold them at its bosom. This title, given to her by the Sui regulators, lets us know about her power, the ability to alter the very seasons themselves. This power allows her to mostly avoid damage from those who do not understand its principles. Although, when faced by someone like Chongye, it is relatively easy to overcome. She can also open up her own pocket dimension, where she faces off with Chongye. Seemingly, this increases the strength of her ability, but it's not enough when faced with a kung fu master like him. She is, despite having an absolute banger design, currently unplayable, but I hope one day Hippogriff will add to her lore and make her playable for me. Moving into the lesser known Feramutts, and we're going to start with Surtur. Yes, the Red Woman finally has some lore, given to us by one of the monthly explorations in Integrated Strategies 4. Surtur, as we know her, is an amnesiac, and only holds vague memories of her past. Well, she gets her name from a former resident of Sami, the Feranmut Surtur, who once challenged Sami and for their trouble was defeated and sealed away. Being described as a flaming giant, we can assume Surtur resembles the fire giant that is its namesake. As its power and form are sealed away, Surtur has had to bounce from host to host, hoping to one day regain its power and might, and even help out the nameless Sarkaz girl it's inhabiting. Now, just because the Feramut is inhabiting the girl doesn't mean it has any control. Surtur is in full control, and uses cold things like ice cream to keep the Feramut quiet. During her trip to Sami, Surtur almost releases the flaming giant from its seal, but with a little guidance from Sami, is able to suppress the Feranmut and claims the name for herself, before continuing her journey towards Kazdel. Unfortunately for the Feranmut Surtur, it doesn't look like he's going to be getting his body back anytime soon. Alive Until Sunset, that one music band that randomly shows up during events, are also a group of Feranmuts. Coming from the waters by Aegir, they have been forced out of their home by the expanding seaborne threat, so not even gods are safe from them. Well, in fairness, the Seaborn have their own Leviathan gods, but still, the group is made up of Alt, Aya, Dan, and Frost, and they have all taken on the appearances of Aegirs to blend in. Not much is really known about them yet, but they will presumably play a larger role in the unfolding events surrounding the Seaborn. Alive Until Sunset have at least made a few appearances in the following events though: Heart of Surging Flame, Gaviel the Great Chief returns, and of course Salty Navis, where they are beginning their move back towards the waters from which they came. Last but not least is the Feranmut that appeared during the events of To the Grinning Valley. Ray's Feranmut, as I will be referring to it as, is a giant Feranmut Ray met during the events of To the Grinning Valley. We basically know nothing about it, other than that it's huge and that it saved Ray from the catastrophe and placed her into the path of the crew she was traveling with. Literally can't say anything else about it, so there you go. At least we know it has one nice eye. So there you have it, Feranmuts. Who they are, what they are, and why they are so cool. Hopefully you learned something from all that, but I want to ask you all one simple question. If you could pick the next Feranmut we meet, what mythological creature would you like them to be? There's probably a lot to choose from, and some of them are no doubt going to be made into a Sarkaz race. But I'll be interested to hear your answers. Y'all be good people, and I will talk to you in the next one. Okay, so I've looked a little further into this line that Ya says about a great eye opening in the sky, bringing disaster, bringing ultimate war, and seemingly it is related to to the sauropod because cut information from the EN version of the game that was on the CN server's banners references a race called Observers, which are like the Doctor's race alien to Terra, and it seems the sauropod was created to protect Terra or hide Terra from them. So potentially when they originally found Terra, whatever event happened between the Doctor's race and these observers, the Feranmut got involved to help resolve it. And it was a devastating battle for both the first civilization and the Feranmut, because I don't think you trap your entire planet in a bubble if you're not worried about what's trying to get in. But that's a discussion for another day, so I'll leave it at that.